Hello there, Commonwealth from here. The Legend of Zelda franchise isn't exactly famous for its graphics. It's usually at the bottom, not being prioritized, in contrast to, say, story and, in most recent years, gameplay. So in this video we'll explore the massive potential that the hardware boost from Nintendo Switch 2 could provide to The Legend of Zelda, as it is a big and significant jump. So be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell. The hardware limitations of the Wii, Wii U and even the Nintendo Switch has reduced Zelda to having to play around with art styles in order to look presentable on our big first HD and also now 4K TVs. But when Nintendo finally is pushing for more hardware power, especially when it comes to docked play on TV, because let's be honest, you don't need much more than a 1080p display when playing handheld anyway. It's a much smaller screen and it's not going to be as noticeable as it is on the big screen. But we are reaching that point where The Legend of Zelda, not only in the case of brand new games, but also remakes, needs to step it up when it comes to its visual fidelity. Yes, Breath of the Wild in 4K will likely look stupendous and run very well, thanks to DLSS upscaling on the Nintendo Switch 2. But at the same time, that is only, what can I say, improving what we're already used to. It doesn't provide anything new to the franchise when it comes to one of these great pillars. Because the Switch provided us the gameplay, story was provided during the Wii generation with Skyward Sword, but then lost during the Wii U/Switch generation. But graphics has really not been seen since 2006. And it is during the era of the Hero of Time that we really got that realistic and, what would I say, high graphic level Zelda that some of us are missing to this day. During the N64 generation, when Nintendo had the most powerful hardware when it came to consoles, we saw Zelda sort of for many peaking when it came to its art style and its realism, but also when it came to the quality of the game. Like, you had the perfect balance of graphics, story, and gameplay. The only problem with realistic art styles is that if you don't have a powerful enough hardware, those visuals will age horribly. And one of the most important things for The Legend of Zelda is its legacy. It's all about being able to pick up these games, say 20 years from now, and still be able to have some enjoyment from them. But the thing is, even though we got that realistic Zelda in 2006, we have gone another 20 years without seeing another realistic looking Zelda. We have the potential of, after a continuation with Breath of the Wild 4K, which is very likely going to be the game this year, for the 40th anniversary to bring back the full pillar. And with what other game than Ocarina of Time 4K? A Final Fantasy VII remake style project where we get the visual upgrade while keeping the great story and also refining the already great gameplay. And this could be the first taste that we could get of the open air future that is not just about gameplay and non-linearity, but also looking as good as it possibly can look and taking full advantage of the hardware that is being provided. Because this is the thing about the Nintendo Switch 2. It isn't just a more powerful console, which docked and boosted will most likely be able to output PS4 Pro levels. It is a system that also has, and deliberately has been working with Nvidia for years now, to provide DLSS, to allow for better performance, that being in the form of high resolutions and frame rates. As a result, you don't have to compromise as much anymore and can once again experiment with more realistic art styles. And why would the Zelda team do this? Well, for one, it sells. The best-selling Zelda games are usually the ones that are more open and also look more realistic. Why is this the case? It's because The Legend of Zelda is most popular in the West, where we're more accustomed to realistic graphics in, say, games like The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, future Elder Scrolls 6, the Witcher franchise, especially 3 and the upcoming 4, and the same goes with countless of other franchises, most of them that have not been on the Nintendo Wii U and even on the Nintendo Switch, which could be starting showing up with this more powerful hardware on the Nintendo Switch 2. And this is the thing that I think we as Zelda fans also need to think about. Yes, we demand more from gameplay, we demand more from bigger worlds. But one thing that many of us have been sitting with a feeling of since Tears of the Kingdom came out is that it was too big for its own good, to the point that it felt bloated, especially when it came to the depths, which were mirrored of the open world that was on the surface but lacked the content and also variety that was found above. So it just shows that Nintendo should, and the Zelda team should probably focus in their next open-air Zelda, but also remakes of their games, to provide more compact and cohesive experiences. Ones that can balance this triforce of gameplay, story, and graphics. When you manage to pull all of these off at once, you get the best Zelda experiences. Ones that are able to sell well, be received well, and have universal acclaim without the repercussions that we saw with Tears of the Kingdom, or Skyward Sword for that matter. But the Nintendo Switch 2 offers the opportunity to change that. First, through remakes, but then eventually as we get to 2028, 2029, in worst case 2030, the brand new open-air Zelda game that the Zelda team in Kyoto work on when it comes to the art style, but also premise, since after 2 games in the same Hyrule, we need something different. Maybe a new location. But as we saw in the case of Twilight Princess, going back to Hyrule doesn't have to be something bad, as long as you provide a new art style and more realism in its graphics. Something that can compete visually against, say, The Witcher 3, Skyrim, and games that came out in between the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, that also being Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because that is the level we need to aim for, and also expect from this franchise. As we're reaching the 40th anniversary, we also need upgrades in both the gameplay, which Nintendo are some of the best at, story, which they need to focus on more in the next game, and graphics, which they had given up. It wasn't really their fault, because the hardware was just not there. We hadn't seen an upgrade in, well, let's be honest, over 12 and a half years before the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2. But as we get to the end of this decade, we need to demand and expect more realistic, and what's more, closer to the open world competition graphics. Because if Elden Ring is going to be running in good performance and proper resolutions, then it would be a shame that The Legend of Zelda cannot reach the same a few years from now. Because what we see across the board, already from the first tease of the Nintendo Switch 2, is that graphics will be an important part of this generation. Mario Kart is getting a big boost, as has been also pointed out by developers who have seen significant upgrades that have not been available on the Wii U or the Nintendo Switch. FSR upscaling did support Tears of the Kingdom a little bit, but it is nothing compared to fully optimized hardware for Nvidia's DLSS. And if there is an opportunity, it should be taken advantage of. As The Legend of Zelda, if it just can play around with art styles, will run stale, and I feel like we have already reached that point when it comes to the 3D games. Skyward Sword was a compromise. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, in many ways, 2 compromises. Yes, they gave us more of a painting feeling, but at the same time, with the burnout that many got from Tears of the Kingdom, you need to provide something more than just the open air. You need to provide something that to be excited about, something that will get us more invested in the franchise. And that, apart from far better and, let's be honest, a little bit linear story, definitely not as fragmented as the memories have been in the last 2 games, is the visuals. It is the only thing that can justify us going through another Switch generation, and in order to survive, say, for the next 20 years, the franchise needs to be adapted with the times. It needs to evolve with them, both when it comes to gameplay, storytelling, but most of all, graphics. If the Nintendo Switch 2 is to be successful when it comes to The Legend of Zelda, apart from having a Zelda game not too late into the generation, it needs to look like a next-gen Zelda. Because the art style that we're currently with is not going to be able to provide that in the same degree, and I think a lot of people will also see that with Breath of the Wild 4K. The games look good, but they will never be on the level of, say, a Witcher, a Skyrim, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Elden Ring. It simply requires more. And when the hardware power is there, there's no longer an excuse to avoid what I would say modern day graphics. But what do you think The Legend of Zelda should be doing? Should it be a step-by-step process by, say, an Ocarina of Time 4K remake that brings back realism, and that's serving as a taste before the proper open-air Zelda that will once again blow us away visually to the same degree as, say, the Space World 2000 project did, and also the Zelda HD project of 2011? is it time to return to a more realistic Zelda? Sound off in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell to make it clear that you also want a visually stunning and also somewhat more realistic Zelda. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching until the end, and to all our patreon.com/commonrealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to Raw Producer, JC Fung, and heroes Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf, and Kintaro. You all rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.